Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be joining you here this morning in the Aviva to address the very important topics that this conference will be focused on. I'm conscious that the Aviva will be the host of many other important guests across the coming weeks. From Norway to Fiji to Australia to South Africa, there will be many other visitors to this stadium that are going to set the hearts of spectators beating. And while we may not have the same effect on those looking in at this event, though we can try and we can hope, nonetheless the deliberations and the discussions that are going to take place here across the next day and a half are really important to economic policy making and to the many regulatory topics that the Governor introduced. So what I'm going to do is build upon the philosophical and the legal foundations that were so lucidly explored by the Governor a moment ago and take that into some of the policy considerations that I'm engaged with and some of the areas that I am working on, in particular as Minister for Finance. And I'll take some time here this morning to give my perspective on where we are on three different topics. The first one is the current issues that are facing the Irish financial system. Secondly, the status of consumer protection here in Ireland and developments underway at an Irish and European level in that domain. And then thirdly, a perspective on the development of culture within financial services and policy and legislation that is underway in that area too. So I'll begin those considerations conscious that the title of this conference is Supporting the Economy and Delivering for the Consumer. At first glance, it could seem that the focus is very much skewed towards what can the financial system do for us as a society and as consumers. However, in order for private financial institutions to operate in Ireland, it must be attractive for them to do so, and it must allow them to make a return for their investors. And we, as policymakers, aim to do this by balancing the interests of the economy and consumers with those of corporate entities so that we have a resulting system that gets the balance right between the differing priorities. Those priorities including how we attract new service providers, how we can allow for healthy business operation and growth, and how critically we can also protect the financial stability of our economic system itself, and by doing so ensure that the impact on the economy is positive. And we do all of this, we aim to attain this equilibrium with a financial system that is ever changing. And the pace of this change continues to increase. Established participants are leaving markets. New players are joining. New financial products are being developed. And the very way we access financial products and services is changing so quickly with the impact of digitization. So in order to deal with this kind of rapid and continuous change, it is of critical importance that stakeholders come together and we address these changes in a coordinated way. Whether they are financial firms, consumer groups, or indeed the ultimate consumer, these stakeholders are actually the financial system. The system is not a stand-alone entity. It is the sum of all involved in it. So an example of the importance of this coordination is the response to the developments that are taking place in our retail banking sector. Look at the kinds of situation we are currently dealing with here in Ireland, with the withdrawal of Ulster Bank and KBC from the retail banking environment. Unlike certain investment products or other services, retail banking in particular affects us all. We all need a current account to go about our normal day-to-day business. So the withdrawal of Ulster Bank and KBC from the market is, of course, regrettable as it reduces choice for consumers. But I acknowledge, of course, that it is a business decision for the firms involved, but a business decision with significant consequence. So this is why it doesn't mean that somebody can just shut up shop and walk away. The whole process is being managed by a host of stakeholders who are coordinating on an ongoing basis. And this involves the central bank, the Department of Finance, the withdrawing banks themselves, the remaining retail bodies, and a whole host of other organisations, for example, including utility providers and other service providers who, of course, process direct debits. So a business decision by just one or two firms highlights very clearly the importance of the systemic response that is needed to allow for the smooth operation of financial services. So that is why it's very timely that one of the panel discussions that will be taking place later this morning is entitled Delivering for the Consumer in a Changing World, because that world is changing so quickly. That is why it is important to me that Ireland, as a jurisdiction, is at the forefront of agile consumer protection legislation, while at the same time allowing new products and new services to be offered to consumers to enhance the choices that are available. Another example of the balance that I referred to a moment ago. An example of this is that earlier this year, legislation passed through the Oireachtas to reform the high-cost credit sector. The amendments made to the Consumer Credit Act will set interest rate caps on high-cost credit products. This will protect the consumers who rely on these small-value, short-term loans. The associated regulations will come into effect in the coming weeks, just in time for the annual increase in spending and borrowing faced by many at the Christmas period. Another example of change with regard to consumer protection is how we have streamlined the licensing process for those providers who will now be able to register for a national license, one that can be renewed every 5 years. These changes will ensure better protection for consumers, while at the same time modernising the way in which those credit providers are regulated. The government will also amend the Consumer Protection Act this year. This brings providers of buy now, pay later products, consumer hire and hire purchase within the remit of the central bank, and provides better protection for consumers who choose to use these products. And of course, all of this is underway while also the central bank having begun a process to review their Consumer Protection Code. And I welcome the publication of the discussion paper and the very inclusive, open and engaged approach taken by the central bank, and I would urge all relevant stakeholders to engage with our regulator on this process. And this is because a systemic approach of coordination and cooperation is always the best way to achieve change. So that there is a summary of all that is underway currently in the area of consumer protection. And as we assess that consumer protection work, we're going to do that in the context of the review that is underway of policy for the retail banking sector. I've acknowledged at other points what are the main areas of focus for this review: the structure of the retail banking sector, its size and structure, the business models and operational challenges faced in implementing these models, structural changes stemming from fintech and digital finance, and many of the other macroeconomic developments acknowledged by the Governor. The Retail Banking Review commenced its work in late 2021, and a public consultation took place between May and July of this year. The Retail Banking Review team will present a draft report to me shortly of this important process, and I look forward to seeing its publication soon. This afternoon, there'll also be a discussion on good culture in financial services. And the government published the Central Bank Individual Accountability Bill 2022 in July of this year, and I'm currently taking that bill through the houses of the Oireachtas. The centrepiece of the new legislation is the Senior Executive Accountability Regime, SEAR. It's a commitment of the programme for government, and this is a regime that will be practicable and proportionate. The issues being addressed in this legislation are clearly complex, and obviously this legislation needs to be constitutionally sound, as the additional powers that are being provided are significant, and it is important that the correct balance between these powers and the protection of individuals' constitutional rights is struck. And this legislation attains that balance. It achieves the balance following lengthy engagement by my officials with our colleagues in the bank, in the Attorney General's office, to ensure that we have legislation that we believe will be effective, will be necessary, will be timely, and will play a positive role in changes in wider banking culture. And these efforts at national level will be taking place in the context of cooperation at European and international level. We're currently working with our European colleagues to further update the Capital Requirements Directive and Regulation under the Basel III agreements. The Payment Services Directive is also being reviewed, with a consultation process now underway. And I know you'll be welcoming Commissioner McGuinness here tomorrow to discuss these developments. And this international perspective really matters because, of course, we have an international financial services sector here in Ireland that's creating more opportunity for more people across the country than ever before. Direct employment in the sector is at its highest level ever, with over 52,000 people working in a diverse array of firms in banking, in investment management and insurance. And this doesn't include the many thousands working in the provision of services to this sector. Regulating, of course, for a global financial market brings many challenges. involving cooperation with international bodies with a view to synchronizing supervisory standards to the level that allows for the smooth and fair oversight of international financial activity. And this is why I welcome the work that has just been completed by the IMF in their Financial Stability Assessment Programme. It takes about 18 months to complete. It's a really significant piece of work and takes place every 5 years. It's a really good way to evaluate the soundness of our financial system, and it's really beneficial to have peers from outside our own system conducting these evaluations so they can bring experience that can inform recommendations to improve our financial system. The most recent FSAP programme focused quite a lot on the international connectivity of our financial system and how the benefits and associated risks of such a system could impact on our economy. Mindful of this dimension to our economy, it's why Ireland is proud to play its role on the international financial services stage. And today's event provides a really good opportunity to reflect on this work in the financial services context. So this context is ever-changing. The only thing that stays the same is the fact that nothing ever stays the same. Change is constant and it is ever-present. It is, of course, especially true for financial services, and there's an onus on those of us who make up the system to keep up with this change. So whether you are a fintech disruptor, a traditional retail bank, an investment firm, an insurer, a supervisor, a government official, or even a minister for finance, we're all part of the system and we have a clear responsibility. We need to coordinate, we need to cooperate in order to deliver for the economy, for society, and for consumers a successful, a stable, and a safe financial system. So that's why this conference here this morning is so important. I want to thank you again, Governor, for the invitation to speak here today, and I want to thank all of you for your presence, both in person and online, and I wish you all the best with the rest of your discussions. Thank you.